Welcome back to Get Down to Business, the show about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship. Super excited to kick off our conversation with Jake Clopton. Jake is founder and CEO over at Clopton Capital. He's an entrepreneur who has found a niche within the commercial real estate lending industry for the past decade. Like many of our guests, the path to founding this organization, as I understand it, was not quite a straight one. So I know, Jake, you've got a lot of great advice for our fellow entrepreneurs. Thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. So tell me a little bit about your background and what led you into this industry.
Okay, sure. So before I was in commercial real estate, I actually traded interbank hedging product futures like 3-month LIBOR and Fed funds, stuff like that. I was doing that up until the credit crisis, right? And at that time, that market that I was in kind of dried up. So I needed to find something else to do. And because I was kind of in banking through the hedging products, I kept hearing about all this commercial real estate debt that was going to be coming due, and people were having trouble finding loans. And my idea was to start a company to help people find commercial real estate loan.
That's awesome. So tell me briefly about what Clopton Capital does and what sets you guys apart.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do a lot of stuff. I run the capital market side, so I facilitate financing for any asset type all over the country. We are also a nationwide commercial property insurance company. We're a real estate brokerage. We are a 1031 QI, and we also do commercial solar installation. So we're really not just financing. We're like a full services firm.
Yeah, that's wild. That's fantastic. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention, obviously, for our Chicago listeners, Chicago is near and dear to you. Although I know you're branching out and doing a lot of stuff all over the country. We'll talk more about that in a moment. So my understanding, Jake, is that you started the company, Clopton Capital, with virtually no contacts. And so I'm curious, what are some of the biggest lessons you've learned in building Clopton Capital from the ground up?
Listen, I started this entire thing just by doing cold calls. That's all I did. I would just pick up the phone, work the phone, call people, make connections. That's what the entire thing was built around.
Jake, in some of our conversations, I know you've mentioned the importance of daily rituals, and I want to stick on that theme for a moment. Can you share some examples of routines, perhaps business related or even personal, that have helped you maintain that focus and productivity? And I guess what advice would you share to aspiring entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest things I tell people is just don't be afraid of getting on the phone. I think a lot of people today, are kind of adverse to that, but that was the biggest thing that really helped me was just doing cold calls, making sure I reach out, make connections. I really think that's, networking and making new connections is just the most important part of this business. Commercial real estate is such a relationship business, right? So the entire thing is built around. As far as routines, besides just always working, right, and never not taking a call and always being around, really just staying healthy, lots of exercise, eating well, and treat yourself like a machine, like an asset, right? And I think that really helps every other aspect of what you have going on.
That's wild stuff. I'm chatting with Jake Clopton from Clopton Capital. It's been a wild ride for Jake, as he has been sharing with us. And Jake, over your time in the commercial real estate lending space, I know you have seen a lot of evolutions. How has the industry evolved over the past decade, and where do you see things going over the next bunch of years?
Yeah, I mean, so here's a good example. The stuff that we end up doing is a lot of what private equity is moving into at the time, right? And, so I see a lot of new asset types that private equity is chasing. For instance, as an example right now, they're chasing a lot of special use products. So I'm doing tons of car washes right now. I never would have done that 10 years ago, right? But there's just so much money moving into different areas, right? People trying to find yield that that's really the biggest evolution, right? It's just wherever the private equity money is going, it ends up being a lot of what we do at the time.
That's great. Jake, I could talk to you for hours, and you've shared some good expertise, of course, in your respective industry, but also for aspiring entrepreneurs, as we just shared a moment ago. Can you share any final tips? I know you've developed, like we said, daily rituals, but also a strong support system. Anything that you could touch on in that regard?
Yes. So one thing when I first started out is I for some reason was hesitant to, I guess, to lay off work to other people. Right. And I wanted to control everything and do everything myself. But the biggest thing I've learned is, if you want to scale and you want to grow, you have to start relying on other people to, leverage other people's time to get done what you want to do. So I would say, learn how to work well with other people and kind of let go of some of the, full-time control that you're trying to have. And that was one of the biggest lessons for me.
That's great. Jake, what does the future hold for Clopton Capital? And very importantly, how can we get a hold of you to continue to follow your organization?
Yeah, I mean, we're just going to try to grow the different silos and, treat one of those like independent businesses. So, just reaching out more and growing each one of those. Our website is cloptoncapital.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm extremely easy to get a hold of, and I'm always around.
Fantastic. Jake Clopton, thank you so much for joining us. I can't wait to bring you back onto the program. We are the show all about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship. You're listening to Get Down to Business. As always, you can find all of our programs on your favorite podcast app. Just search for Get Down to Business or get on my website, syklein.com. We've got a quick break, but we've got a lot more small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship after the break. Don't touch that dial, Chicago. You're listening to Get Down to Business.